Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Слышно? Переводчики, переводчики. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Слышно? Раз, два, три, четыре. Они не слышат. Да? Услышали? Окей, все. Коллеги, давайте рассаживаться. Я прошу всех занимать свои места. Мы понимаем.
Dear colleagues, please take your seats. We are about to begin our forum.
Коллеги, мы...
Colleagues, we are about to start. Please take your seats. Alexander, please.
Ну что, уважаемые...
Okay, dear colleagues. Please take your seats. So, dear colleagues, we start our plenary session of our second discussion panel with such a beautiful names, the worlds of Buddhism, unity and diversity. We are going to talk about Buddhism as it is in the modern world, about the challenges as I understand those, and not only myself. Buddhism is very diverse, and very often we see that in different countries we have different Buddhism, and nobody can say that the Buddhism that is in Tibet and the Buddhism that is in Japan, it's the same Buddhism. No, they are different, and we have different terms, different deities, different systems, different schools. And the only thing we can say about the unity of Buddhism is the fact that compared to Islam or Christianity, we don't have, this canonism. We don't have this stupid stuff that would be rejected by main directions and branches. So today we are going to talk about everything that I have mentioned above, and we have 8 speakers today, and I would like to ask all the speakers to be brief, because we have a lot of presentations, as I said, and we are limited in time, so please limit yourself to 10 or maximum 15 minutes just to have time for discussion after we have finished all our presentations. So unfortunately, we do not have a desk here, so our speakers are welcome to take these chairs and present there. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Persuren Byambakshing from the Institute of Philosophy, Mongolian Academy of Sciences from Mongolia, who will tell us about the basis of spiritual unity and identity of Mongolians, Buddhism and some multi-religious challenges. Uh, Mr. Peruvshven, you are welcome. Just a couple of minutes, please. Okay. Okay. Maybe we will invite Vitlushka Lydia Leonidovna. Why not? Are you ready? You know, let's relax. Okay, Lydia Leonidovna, you're welcome. Lydia Leonidovna is from Burat State University, and she will tell us about Vajrayana Buddhism in China and how this Buddhism transformed in China. You are welcome. You are welcome, Lydia Leonidovna. Good morning, dear guests, dear organizers, and dearest audience of our conference. I have my presentation. I would like to show it. The only thing I would like to mention that I would like to see the presentation. Maybe I will sit a little bit aside, and could you please remove the central chair so everybody could see the presentation? Okay, very nice. Yeah, I think it's much better. Thank you. I would like to be brief and for Buryatia, Vajrayana Buddhism is very close. In Buryatia, historically, Tibetan schools of Buddhism are presented, and Vajrayana Buddhism is what we do know. And it is more interesting how Vajrayana was developing in China, how it is represented. Vajrayana Buddhism China, ways of transformation. The form of Chinese Buddhism is different from Tibetan one, but at the basic level, Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, penetrated simultaneously into Tibetan and Chinese culture. I need to understand how to navigate the slides. Could you please help me with the remote control? Yeah, so because I don't understand how to use this presenter just to make it work. Yeah, I have tried everything, but nothing works. Okay, Vajrayana in China has different names. Zinganshan, Jianshan, a school of true words. Its mantra, Mizao. It's a sacred teaching. Mimizao means the same, secret or sacred teaching. Then Datelo Zhao, it's like Tantra. It's transliteration. That's why it sounds like that. And then Tunmi, Chinese Tantrism, Chinese Tantra, then Tanmi, Buddhist teaching of Buddhist Tantra in Tibet, and Vajrayana in Japan is the last. When you talk to the specialists in China and you say Metao, specialists say about Tanmi. Junmi is less known, I would say, or more known in a narrow circle of specialists. So we have three periods of formation of the development of esoteric Buddhism in China. Of course, it's very vague, yeah, but we will work with it in any case. So the first period, the third, the 7th centuries, second, the 8th, the 9th centuries, and the third, 10th, 13th centuries. The most interesting period is number 2, 8th, 9th centuries, where the school of Chinese Buddhism, Vajrayana, was formed, and is connected with the names of three doers, Shubhakarasimha, Vajrabodhi, and Amaghavajra. And these three teachers, one by one, arrived in China and worked with very interesting things. First of all, they worked with translations. I'm sorry, but it's a wrong presentation. Okay, I will adjust to it. Okay, Shubhakarasimha arrived in China in 637 year, so he was 69 years old. In India, he was very educated. He obtained his education in India. He was a very respected person, and at this senior age, he went to China. In China, he obtained knowledge of the Chinese language at the level that allowed him to translate 17 big texts, and including the text that became canonic, the sutra that became canonic. The second person who arrived in China and also worked with the translations and was very successful in it was Vajrabodhi Dinganji, and his operation started again at senior age, more or less at the age of 50 years old, and during 15 years he was teaching. And we have to say that Emperor's power was very attentive to it, was very interested in these people, and maybe it seemed very beautiful, very promising, very sacred to them, and the Emperor's power, the Emperor's regime patronized this school. And of course it wasn't the school itself, but what it was at that period of time. His movements across monasteries was controlled, and Shubhakarasimha Shanwei lived until 97 years old. At the age of 95, he asked the permission from the emperor to return to India, and the emperor said no, because he was totally controlled by the emperor. And then approximately the same time, with Vajrabodhi, they continue translation work, and the third person in this row, or in this list, I would say, it's Amaghavajra Bukunzingan. His origin is high. He's from Brahman family. He arrived in China at the age of 10, compared with the first two, and at the age of 15 he became disciple of Vajrabodhi, a student of Vajrabodhi, and he was very smart. He knew Tripitaki, and he was initiated fully. And after Dinganji left, Bukunzingan was very free, and he freely traveled. It means that he never asked emperor's permission. He was absolutely free. He got the liberty, and he was very honored and respected. So Tsinganji was educated in a temple of Langa, and he was initiated on Nagarjuna line. So it means that Vajrasatra gave this line of initiation, of enlightenment, and Shubhakarasimha was a teacher, a translator, and all these three teachers were named Kayuan Santashi, three great teachings of the epoch of Kai Yuan. And it's worth mentioning Monk Isin. Why? If you are interested in mathematics or astronomy, and if you open an encyclopedia or works devoted to tandem sciences, we will see the name of Isin. He was a fantastically talented person, and his talents spread across Vajrayana as well. He wrote, so of course I will not plunge into details on his biography, and he wrote a very wide commentary about the works Piluchina Chenfo Zinshu, comments to Sutra of Formation of Buddha in and classification in the Middle Centuries also belongs to them. In the Middle Centuries in China, there were 4 classifications of Buddhism teachings. Each school which formed such classifications put on the head their own teaching and proved that other teachings are less maybe effective or less clear as the teaching of this school. So Isin made such classification. So what became what was the outcome of this history, of this story, of this middle period of the 8th and 9th centuries of formation of Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism in China? Our respected moderator, by the way, he started the next step of this school, Singon School, so this topic is very well known and familiar to him. So, as for the period, getting back to the period, Vajrayana school, mid-zone, prospered, and several monasteries appear, the centers of teaching of Vajrayana teaching in China, and one of the most famous one now is located in Xi'an city, and it's still a working monastery, Tafusin, and there you can see the portraits, and these teachers are respected, and patronage of this school was formed from political power of China, and it was good, it seemed good, because you can imagine Vajrayana, huge, tremendous initiations, these ceremonies, and this administration, the emperor with the family, with his children, all the colonels, all the officers. Some of them understood, some of them didn't, but they did. They were initiated to Vajrayana, but when the repressions of Tang spirits occurred, generally on Buddhism, of course, Vajrayana school suffered the most because it was closest to the emperor's power. It was the closest to the political center of China. And this classification was presented within the framework of Chinese culture, and own calligraphical tradition was also presented. Deities depicted Dhyani of Buddha in mandala, got Chinese connotation. So, but I'm not going to plunge into details here. I will not stop on it here. And yeah, Lydia Leonidovna, please draw the results, draw the conclusion, please. Okay. So, to conclude, all these basics that I have mentioned above are in front of you. So these are the main results of formation of Vajrayana in China during the Tang period. In China. Thank you very much. Lydia Leonidovna, what gives you the evidence to think that Vajrayana school is a school, that we can call it a school? Yeah, I know that you think differently. I do know this, I'm aware. So why? because the line, as I say, they call it the line of relationships between a teacher and a student, novice, monasteries. Yeah, no. During the Tan's period in one monastery, monks of different directions lived and worked. But nevertheless, there is a list of monasteries with sustainable teaching of Vajrayana. And why did it disappear? My next question, to compare with other directions, for example. I think that by that time, this cultural niche was occupied by Nazism and China, and during this repression of Tan's period, China was already sustainable, so sustainable and stable, and was far from the emperors and didn't belong to the emperor's power. That's why it survived, yeah. But then it went through Kukai to Japan and was left in China in such a discrete form, reduced form, but still stayed there. Thank you very much. I'm inviting our next presenter, our colleague from Mongolia, Mr. Perseveran. Are you ready? Distinguished guests of the Buddhist Forum, I would like to present in Mongolian language. Just a moment.
I would like to present my presentation in a very brief form in 10 minutes, taking into account we have a very short time. So, can you see my slides? We need some technical support. Can we have a technician over here, please? We need some technical support, please. Yeah, we need help in moving slides around. Can you see it now? So the main content of the presentation, I'm going to mostly focus on the third part, the challenges of Mongolian Buddhism and multi-religious conditions that now we face in Mongolia. So I would like to focus on this aspect. Of course, the current situation with Buddhism in Mongolia is well studied by the researchers. The economic situation in Mongolia is changing. We have increased foreign investments, and that is why also connected with this is the development of religious movements. We have all the conditions, changing conditions, multi-aspect conditions of existing different coexistence of different religions in Mongolia. We have a policy of long-term development in Mongolia, and its interaction and regulation with the policy of Buddhism. Will be the topic of my presentation. In 2018, we had major research on the current situation with Buddhism and the religion in general in Mongolia. All across Mongolia, we had research on the religious situation in the country. So I would like to move to the main point. As I said before, the policy of long-term development of Mongolia until 2015, the vision to 2050 has a part where it says that the main values of the country, national unified values of the country, are indicated. And this document outlines the values of Mongolia, and one of them is the spiritual unity and identity of Mongolians. Of course, the situation is far from simple because, as I said earlier, the religious conditions and since 1990s the economic conditions connected with the religious conditions, with a lot of directions, a lot of movements, contradicted to the traditional situation. We used to have a two-part principle of coexistence between the politics and the religion. Until a certain point in time, religion was parallel to politics. So what I would like to emphasize is that we can use the term Mongolian Buddhism because it has its specific features. Both religious, non-religious people, devoted people can be divided into several types, which you can see listed on the slide. As you can see in the slide, a ceremonial cup which was found on the territory and excavated on the territory of Mongolia in one of its regions. It refers to the Gun period of history. Based on the relics found on the territory of the country, we can prove that Buddhism in Mongolia has existed for over 2,000 years. Some researchers think that Buddhism in Mongolia existed since the Tang period, but still we can arrive to the conclusion that Mongolia has had a very long history of Buddhism, and archaeological findings can prove this point. At least several centuries of history of Buddhism in Mongolia can be proven by the archaeological explorations. So I would like to emphasize that the specific nature of Buddhism in Mongolia is defined by the specific conditions in the country. So the main question, political versus religious interaction in Mongolia, is the question of co-developing Islam and Buddhism, whether or not they will have the status of the official religion of the country. Because if we consider the timeline, the time period, of course, both these religions are truly Mongolian religions that are spread in the country, that they have had a long history in the country. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the religious situation in Mongolia, the situation with the youth in Mongolia, the number of believers has been decreasing rapidly, but the number of consistent believers at the same time has been increasing. And the influence of newer religions such as Christianity or other directions of course is significant, and that's why we have to understand the balance the harmonious coexistence of different religions and their aspects. This is an important issue. And the next point is that since long ago, Mongolians said that we are a country of three values. So, and the very first and the foremost is Buddhism. Lama is occupying the top place, and Buddhism peacefully coexisted with the authorities, with the politics. That's why I believe we need a new term, Mongolian Buddhism, to show this nature, this character of Buddhism in this country. And the role of Buddhism in the unity of the nation, in creating common values, is of high importance for the nation. And further, the government's involvement in this, the government role in developing the policy is crucial to make sure that representatives of the young generation reconsider their attitude, because right now they are not very close to the religion. Like last week we had a huge celebration, a holiday in the country, a religious holiday. And unfortunately, the young people have demonstrated negative attitude. Why should we call it a religious holiday? They want to be more secular, so they are more negative to the religion, unfortunately. That's why we have to reconsider this and to increase the involvement of the population in general and of the young people in particular, because the younger the people, the less involved in the religion they are. I believe we need a revision of the law on regulating the relationships between the religion and the government, the country. And of course, we need an increased unity, and many monasteries have to exchange practices, exchange the experience in involving people. Certain monasteries have their medical departments, their schools, educational centers, prominent representatives, so we have a very developed network of monasteries. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm finishing my presentation. Can you please explain if Buddhist organizations in Mongolia use new strategies to increase the involvement of the young people? Do they do they have new steps? So, thank you so much for your question. Buddhist centers in Mongolia have seen massive transformations, and they see a lot of investment in new monasteries, and they establish their own TV channels where they disseminate Buddhist education. But these are positive trends. We also face some negative trends. There are a lot of contradictions, controversies around the main monastery, and the public is debating the situation with the central monastery. But actually, yeah, the main monastery has a lot of interaction with the public, and another monastery also organizes big educational events, and we have representatives of this monastery here at the forum, so I believe they will also explain their situation. Thank you so much.
Далее попрошу занять.
I would like to invite Dr. Dao Jian rector of the Buddhist Academy, the chairman of the Hawaiian Cultural and Educational Foundation. With his presentation, Traditional Buddhism and Challenges of Today. Мне
Все, не надо вот это крутить. У вас это всегда на первом. Всегда. Сейчас должен приходить.
the most ancient and outstanding features like kindness, traditional Buddhism from the past, self-development and enlightenment, and behavior, proper behavior. However, in the modern world, we have a big question that needs to be answered. The traditional Buddhism is tightly connected with innovation. And that is a challenge. We need to remember our history and connect it with the modern world and to continue the traditional wisdom. We would like to understand what, who, what to do. We need to understand together what we need to do to develop what is development and what to do to develop our traditional concept of Buddhism. And self-development, harmony in our society, educates monarchy. How can we? So the utilization of the modern world of the concept of the main concept of Buddhism is supposed to be considered as something traditional. However, innovations play a crucial role in the modern world, so the traditional Buddhism could stay, could survive, and could live to be used by further generations. We more and more use modern media, social media, through which the Buddhist ideas spread, and through social media we can engage and involve more young people, so they could become aware of the Buddhism. So people in today's world, amid this, modern world and challenges, could find some plot of peace, some island of peace and enlightenment. So, in terms of psychology and science and discoveries of modern sciences, media can help us in it, and we need innovations to convey the messages and ideas of traditional Buddhism. Yeah, that is a direct link and relationship between the modern world and traditional Buddhism. We support the ideas of independency in the modern world of Buddhism, and we need to develop inside ourselves and educate in ourselves and in our young people to spread true Buddhism, true concept of Buddhism among young people and for our young people in our society. We do need to understand how we can how we can combine the modern philosophy, other religions, to find this harmony in our modern society and to find harmony with other sciences, to build this harmony. And dear guests, dear audience, traditional Buddhism appeared raises a question, I would say, raises many questions. So as not to lose the followers and to spread Buddhism, the main concepts and ideas of Buddhism, to spread and to involve more people, to educate more people. So and social media play a huge and crucial role in the modern world. So I hope there's a world of kindness and mercy and compassion in the modern world among modern people would go on, and it will have great influence on modern world. Thank you very much. One question. Can we say that in China there are main Buddhist schools? For example, School of China or Tantei or Medaism. What Buddhist schools are there in China and are the most popular in China? In China, as you know, we have a lot of people who live there, so there are different schools, but um, Buddhism is popular. We cannot say which Buddhism or which school of Buddhism is the most popular. My answer is no. Thank you. Great, great. And now Alexander Georgievich Stadzhuk will tell us about folk ideas about afterlife ordeals. It's very interesting for all of us, I believe. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues. I, first of all, I will not go deep into history, but I hope it will be published and those who are interested will read it. And before we start speaking, I would like to say big and warm hello from St. Petersburg, from those who work in Oriental Studies. It's such a pleasure for me to work here with you, and it's such a great pleasure to be here in Ulan-Ude Forum. So, back to my presentation. So, how do we understand the question about death and afterlife? So this is the main question, not to any religious system, but this is the main question that actually forms our behavior, because we actually look at what we are going to have in our life after death. Buddhism is not an exception here, and the answer to this question should be like that. It should be the basis. I don't know, maybe understanding of Buddhist system of the world. So how we respond to it. So, am I a Buddhist or not? So it may be surprising, but Buddhism gives us several options to answer this question, especially when we take into consideration Buddhism, or like popular or folk Buddhism. It's not what scientists or great teachers, orthodox schools work with, but how it is interpreted among common people. And it was very interesting to observe using the history of the Chinese culture, because Buddhism in China starts to practicing by Buddhist teachers in the beginning of our era. So by the 7th century, Buddhist church has about 8 or 10% of the national wealth of China, and based on it, a lot of unpleasant moments during the Tan's dynasty reign. So you know that in the 800s, yeah, so this power became great, very powerful social in terms of economy and society, so socially and economically. And based on it, folk Buddhism was developing, for which many terms become very complicated and complex. For example, the translation or transmission of karmic information through different channels seem to be very difficult to understand by common people. And another system of understanding of Buddhism after life appears. Partially, it happens based on classical Buddhist sutras, in particular, for example, Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra, and so on. And partially, it happens based on the traditional Chinese understanding of the world and of the body existence. If the Buddhist body based on 5 skandhas without any soul, or without this thin material soul. So folk people of China don't want to reject the idea of a soul. There is a soul and it doesn't go anywhere. Moreover, in the folk Buddhism of China, this soul becomes one soul, literally one soul. So why I'm focusing on it right now, I want to draw your attention, because in the traditional understanding about the organization of thin bodies in
Это 3 эфирные души, хунь, и это 7 животных душ пхо. Так вот, в народном буддизме они все трансформируются в одну душу. И эта одна душа у нас претерпевает какие-то дальнейшие, приключения после смерти. Как они выглядят? И вот здесь тоже интереснейшая вещь. Выглядят они очень похоже на то, как устроена система традиционного китайского судопроизводства. То есть первоначальная идея о том, что есть некий, так сказать, глава загробного мира, Ямараджа, как один Ямараджа может справиться со всеми судебными вопросами? Это же невозможно. Ранняя сутра, так называемая сутра 10 царей, Шивангдин, была воспринята в Китае, так сказать, с радостью, с удовольствием. Этих судей становится 10, и все они называются Ямараджа, так они называются Янь Лоуан. А впоследствии понятие Ямараджа становится вообще, как бы это сказать, названием должности. В очень многих народных, так сказать, текстах мы находим свидетельство о том, что жил человек, очень хорошо жил, прекрасно себя зарекомендовал, поэтому его привлекают на тот свет в качестве Ямараджи. Не каждый день привлекают, он там живет месяц, потом теряет сознание, дня так на 3-4, потом очнулся, и в это время, пока он был без сознания, он на том свете исполнял обязанности Ямараджи. Ямараджи становится много. Вместо 16 классических адов, которые первоначально были унаследованы китайским буддизмом из, так сказать, классических текстов, количество адов начинает расти. Но если у нас 10 судебных залов, то количество адов должно быть соответствующим. В настоящее время мы с коллегами где-то примерно 10 лет провели в полевых исследованиях, изучая, как это дело происходит, как в это дело верят. количество адов, ну, я не могу сказать, сколько их точно, примерно 140, в районе 140. Какие эти ады? Самые разные. Ну, есть там, где там пилят, жарят, это все понятно. Мне очень понравился ад, вот мне, так сказать, как-то он на душу лег. Ад, где вынимают мозг и вместо него засовывают ежиков. Ну, наверное, часто его вспоминаю на всякого разного рода, по всякого разного рода поводам. Ады множится количество загробных всяких разных чиновников. У начальника загробного департамента, это вот такой вот есть целый загробный департамент, его начальник — это божество Тайшаня. Так вот, в его подчинении 75 управ. Многие из них дублируются, многие из них вообще непонятно зачем. Только одних канцелярских управ около 10. Здесь нам ставят печать, здесь надо потом понести в ту управу, там на нее поставят подпись, потом надо принести в эту управу, на подпись поставить еще печать. В общем, замечательно. Работает как часы. После смерти вот эта самая душа оказывается, так сказать, первая вот ее, так сказать,
And this, yeah, so I was looking for right words. So in the first place, where the soul goes, it's the deity or god of the place, and bureaucracy occurs, yeah. So the soul has all the documents, and all these documents go to the city authority, afterlife city authorities, then preliminary hearings, then some other procedures must be taken. If a person behaved well during his or her life, he or she is sent to the last hearing in the court, and then these 10 judges make their decision. If a person misbehaved during his or her life, of course, they would serve as guardians. If the person didn't have sins during life, and how, by the way, we can understand that special halls in the court work with it, you know. It's not about actions only, it's about thoughts. You see, for example, in the sixth hall of this court, they work with only those who only once in their life thought that the ruler doesn't care about his subjects, yeah? And if this thought occurred once in their heads, you are guilty, you go to hell. So you see, in different texts, this procedure is very well written in detail. In folk Buddhism in China, it's called precious copies of Nifrit's texts. And this Ilibal Chow describes this way in detail, but there is more interesting and more detailed text about it. What is more interesting here is the fact that time changes and ideas about this transformation, they change, but not significantly, you know. They have amazing details that were not provided in the beginning. For example, there are several halls in afterlife world who study the cases of people died in car crashes and accidents. There are halls where souls of dead people who, for example, died before their time and before the term, and now they have new laws and orders, and they are already presented there. People, no, deities and gods who serve there, they become the most popular heroes, I can say, of different mass cultures, folk cultures. In computer games, for example, they are presented in all varieties. For example, there are two heroes, White and Black Ushans, who take a soul out of a dead person to send it further. So, and these guys are represented in toys in China, in computer games, in different comics and series, and I actually could see a TV show of not that decent contact with these Uchans. So these gods and deities have already become an integral part of social media and new modern narrations and understanding of the world. I can talk a lot about it. I can say that in folk Buddhism in China, there is a huge integration and merge of intercultural components because the originator from traditional texts in the Chinese tradition is represented in the arrived Korean prince Kim Kogaka, who held or who during the Tan's reign was a very successful missionary, and now he is portrayed everywhere with an animal, Tintin, who can hear everything and who knows everything. And this prince is depicted and described in numerous texts about folk Buddhism. For example, in a novel Travel to the West, Tin helps the main character of this novel to understand very complex questions when nobody could help him. Okay, briefly, this area of folk Buddhism and understanding about afterlife ordeals is extremely important from my perspective to study and to understand how we can make or build a contact on the level of personal and cultural between different countries and regions, including the Chinese and Chinese folk Buddhism is a great help here. I hope I managed to fit the time, and thank you, Alexander Georgievich. Just a moment. It's very interesting what you have described. One question: what you call folk Buddhism? Can it be called just a Buddhism? Because in this case, it's just a tradition on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's already business, right? The thing is, we had different options how to call it, what I don't agree with totally. It's of course it's a long discussion, but it's some syncretism. So syncretically, it's impossible to answer a very important question: what will happen to you after death? You cannot say it you will live like that or something will happen. Yeah, so we just take a belief, and there are many deities and gods who take part in it, but it doesn't change the concept of this religion or philosophy. Why we speak about Buddhism here? Because the main Buddhist rules in this folk Buddhism, in this folk variant, stay there, and the figure of Buddha, of Lord Buddha, stays there, and the main helper is Avalokiteshvara in folk Buddhism, So the key concept stays there, and of course there are different characters like Nephritis Emperor, who is a very important figure and very important manager or policymaker above, but he cannot be compared with Avalokiteshvara or Buddha. Here we name Amitaist direction of Buddhism, but still not necessarily. Sometimes it can vary, but I can say that it has Buddhist basics and foundation. I'm sure 100%. It's not disputable at all. I have no doubts. And then everything that can be explained or cannot be explained. Classical texts, for example, Sutra about 10 kings that I mentioned earlier, is a Buddhist text, but this text already was written for those who do not understand these details of Mahayana system, of the transmission of your conscious to further. So a common person, yeah, who works hard, common people, they shouldn't think about these complex things, but in any case they will understand the simple ideas of Buddhism, and these missionaries texts were designed for this, yeah, with these purposes. Yeah, I hope we will have time to discuss it later. Thank you.
And we are inviting Manikratna Shakya from the Buddhist University of Lumbini in Nepal. The topic of the presentation is opportunities and challenges of Buddhism in Nepal. Могу ли я увидеть свою презентацию?
To present my presentation. Okay. Homage to Triple James. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for giving me opportunity to express few words in this program. And I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the organizer for inviting me to express few words and to participate in this program. I'm going to deliver my presentation on traditional Buddhism of Nepal. You know, Nepal is known as the birthplace of the Buddha. There is a picture of Lumbini, that is the temple of birthplace of the Buddha. And also Nepal is known as the place of the mountain. This is the Everest, Mount Everest. This is the highest mountain in the world. Nepal is known that two objects. Next. Yes, this is the picture of Kathmandu Valley. I'm going to deliver on the traditional Buddhism of Nepal. The Buddhism is existing in the Kathmandu Valley. Which one? In order to define the traditional Buddhism, some points have been developed, because how can we define the traditional Buddhism? In order to define the traditional Buddhism, we have to follow some components. In order to define the traditional Buddhism, I have developed, some points have been developed. That means the Buddhism which has carried out the long history of the country, the Buddhism which can demonstrate art and architecture of the country. Similarly, the Buddhism which has been followed by the ethnic people of the country. Based on these 3 points. Next. The Buddhism which has carried out a long history of Nepal, the Buddhism which can demonstrate Nepalese art and architecture, the Buddhism which can represent identity of Nepal. That is the traditional Buddhism of Nepal, and it is also known as Newaro Buddhism, and it is also known as Buddhism of Nepal Mandala. Next. Now I am going to deliver some features of. Sorry. So I should stay here. The Newara Buddhism is based on the Swayambhu and the Buddha stupa. This stupa is listed in the World Heritage. These stupas were constructed around 1400 years ago. And these stupas are listed in the World Heritage. Based on that statement, it can be said that the Newara Buddhism or the traditional Buddhism of Nepal is also listed or recognized by the UNESCO. And this is the Buddha stupa. This is the one of the biggest stupa of Nepal. And here I am mention some important tradition that is existing in the traditional Buddhism of Nepal. The first one is Sukhavati tradition. I would like to highlight that just before our professor had said Sukhavati Biho Sutra. That is one of the important sutra, and based on that sutra, the Sukhavati tradition is practiced. When any person passed away, the people of the Buddhism of Nepal wish that may he or she born in Sukhavati heaven. The Sukhavati heaven means the land of the Amitabha Buddha. It is also called the Pure Land. This tradition was developed in 4th century in India, but now the tradition completely collapsed in India, and in Nepal the tradition is still existing. The people of the Nepal Mandala has been practicing this tradition. Similarly, another tradition is Nam Sangiti recitation tradition. Nam Sangiti is one of the tantric texts. The people of the Buddhism of Nepal Mandala have been reciting this text every day in the morning. It was also developed in the 6th century in Nalanda University. Similarly, Guru Mandala tradition. Guru Mandala tradition is based on the Sumeru mountain. The concept of Sumeru mountain was developed in around 8th century in Nalanda and Vikramshila University. Until today, this tradition is practiced in the Buddhism of Nepal Mandala or traditional Buddhism of Nepal. Similarly, another tradition is Chakra tradition. Chakra is one of the esoteric deities. His practice is very essential in Vajrayana Buddhism. The practice of Chakra tradition is existing in the Buddhism of Nepal or in Newara Buddhism. And some prominent Buddhist master of traditional Buddhism of Nepal. The first one is Bagiswara Kirti. Bagiswara Kirti seems to have been established the Chakra tradition in Nepal. And he was a student of Nalanda University. He completed his study in 10th century from Nalanda University. Then he came back to Nepal and he established the Chakra tradition in Nepal. Another important Buddhist master is Bhalpo Silamanju. Bhalpo Silamanju. Bhalpo means the Kathmandu Valley and Silamanju is his name. He is very famous in Tibetan Buddhism. He established a lineage in Tibetan Buddhism. Similarly, another prominent Buddhist master is Srota Vajra. He is also very famous in the Tibetan Buddhism. He had delivered many lectures, many teachings in the Tibetan Buddhism. Another is Leela Vajra. Leela Vajra is also one of the prominent Buddhist masters of traditional Buddhism of Nepal. He had established one Buddhist tradition in Nepal and in the Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet. See, here I am going to display some pictures of the traditional Buddhism of Nepal. This is the picture of ordination. The small boys are ordinated in that Buddhism, and this Buddhism is the combination of Mahasangika and the Sarvastivada. The boys are holding here are the novices are holding begging bowl and staff. The staff indicates the influence of Sarvastivada Buddhism, and the procedure of ordination is based on the Mahayana Buddhism. So the Buddhism is said the combination of Mahasangika and Sarvastivada. And this is the remarkable Buddhist art and architecture. Architecture can be seen in this monastery. This is one of the ancient Buddhist monastery of traditional Buddhism of Nepal. In that monastery, we can see Buddhist art and architecture in different ways. What happened is that here I am displaying the architecture and art of the Buddhism. It is not working well. See, this is also one of the example of the art. What happening is? This is the example of metal art. This is the chariot festival existing in Buddhism of Nepal Mandala. This chariot festival is one of the renowned and world famous chariot festival. This festival is associated with the Lokeswara. It's the same picture. And they are the chief 10 persons of the monasteries. In the tradition of Buddhist, Newara Buddhism, they are handling the Buddhism in the monastery. It's not working well. This is also the picture of the practice of traditional Buddhism of Nepal. This is the esoteric practice. And the followers of the Buddhism they recite the Sanskrit text. The Newara Buddhism is based on the Sanskrit text. This is one of the texts. The text is written in traditional Buddhist script. This is also one of the another example of the Sanskrit text that is written in Newari script. Now I am going to highlight the effects of the modernity. In the traditional Buddhism of Nepal, there are two types of followers. One is monastic followers and another is lay followers. Most of the lay followers were involving in their own profession. That profession is associated with the Buddhism. But nowadays, they are stopping their profession due to the modern profession. Because when they make any monuments of Buddhism, for example, statue, for example, under monuments, they can provide in low price. But the modern technology made the monuments in low price. So they are stopping their profession. Due to the impact of that, stopping that profession, we are facing the problem when we reconstruct any Buddhist monuments. In 2008, we have undertaken to reconstruct the Swayambhu Stupa. That time, the stupa was constructed in around 1200, 1400 years ago. There were traditional system, but nowadays there are not any those types of person who can understand or who can do the traditional work in the traditional way. So most of the persons are facing the problems due to the modern influences. Similarly, traditional manuscripts are written in Sanskrit language and in the traditional script. Nowadays, in the modern education, the language is not instructed and the traditional script are not instructed. So due to the modern education, I mean the Eurocentric education is influencing in the Buddhism and for the practitioner of the Buddhism. So what we have been doing, I am as a Dean of the Lumini Buddhist University, we have given priority to the monastic education. Nowadays in my university, the monastic education, who pass the monastic education, they can join in university. We have given recognition to the monastic education. Similarly, we have focusing the canonical language such as Sanskrit, Tibetan, Chinese, Pali. The students who have joined in our university, they compulsory must study those canonical languages so that they will be able to read the traditional Buddhist manuscript. In that way, we are going ahead. Okay, thank you very much.
Спасибо. Спасибо. У меня один маленький вопрос.
Thank you so much. I have one simple question. You have mentioned that now there are new constructions instead of early traditional constructions. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by new constructions?
Renovation. For example, we have many Buddhist monuments that were constructed many years ago. When we reconstruct those monuments, we have to follow the traditional rules and regulations. We have to construct in the same way. Otherwise, that monuments will be a new monuments. In order to follow the traditional way and traditional system, there should be the expertise. Otherwise, we can't construct. So we need to keep that expertise with those persons who have been involving in that field since long.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, спасибо.
Thank you.
Так, сейчас я попрошу нашего уважаемого...
Now I'm going to invite Ranjana Demavitra to speak about Sri Lankan Buddhism. Dear colleagues, I will try to be brief. Oh, you don't have to. You have your 12 minutes. Thank you so much. What should I start with? First of all, we can divide studying Ceylon Buddhism in Russia into three main periods. I would call the first period the period of empire, starting from Afanasy Nikitin travels until the Great Revolution in 1917. The next would be the Soviet period, and finally the post-Soviet or modern period after the collapse of the USSR. The increased interest to Ceylon in general and Ceylon, let's say, religious aspect in Russia appeared in the last half of the 19th century, which is associated mainly with the internal situation of Russia after joining Far Eastern territories to the Russian Empire. The most convenient way connecting these new territories to the rest of Russia was the sea route. And in the middle of this sea route was the island of Ceylon. That's why many ships which were traveling between Odessa and Vladivostok or Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk arrived in the port of Ceylon, had a stopover in the port of Ceylon, Definitely, these were not only the military, not only the prisoners, but also the scholars. And actually, they had a genuine interest in all the countries that they could explore on their way. So, this is how the Ceylon of the 19th century became the focus of Russian scholars' attention. Also, there was a demand in academic study of Ceylon Buddhism, which is associated with the name of St. Petersburg professor Ivan Pavlovich Minaev, the greatest expert on the Pali language of the time, and his dissertation also focused on the grammar of the Pali language. In 1874, Ivan Pavlovich Minaev arrived in, started studying South Buddhism, arrived in Sri Lanka. So I would like to remind you that in Russia there has been a traditional interest to Northern Buddhism. It has been explored deeply since old times, which is associated with the names of Vasiliev and other prominent scholars. First, Chinese Buddhism was the focus, then Mongolian Buddhism. Still, at a certain point, Southern Buddhism became also the point of attention. Yeah, first it was beyond the interest of Russian Empire, but with time, with the development, the interest, the focus shifted. In the end of the 19th century, during the reign of the last emperor of Russia, when he was first the heir of the throne, this was the time when close contacts with Thailand were established. And this has had an impact and led to a rise in not only academic interest to Buddhism, but also studying Southern Buddhism from a utilitarian point of view, geopolitical point of view. Nevertheless, this empire period cannot be called the start of the academic study of Buddhism in Russia. Ceylon Buddhism in particular, I mean. Why is that? Although Ivan Pavlovich Minaev was a prominent expert in the Pali language, he knew Buddhism perfectly, but studying Ceylon Buddhism in his practice is marked by, I would say, just notes on the essence of Buddhism. Yes, he had encounters with Buddhist monks, and he wrote about that. So he speaks about comparing the theory of Buddhism and the practice of Buddhism. So his study of Ceylon Buddhism is limited to that, just some simple sketchy notes on his observations. But the academic study, the serious professional study of Ceylon Buddhism starts later, I would say in the end of the 50s. Of the 20th century, because it is connected with the interest to Buddhism at the government level, I would say, including Southern Buddhism. the restoration of Oriental studies in general, and studying Buddhism was one of the aspects of the Oriental studies. During the reign of Stalin, the Stalin rule, the traditions were partly lost, so we can say that in 1950s there was a restoration of the interest to the East, and including the study of Ceylon Buddhism. And this newly revived interest to Buddhism is closely connected with the name of Yuri Rerich, who was invited to Moscow. Of course, there was an important role of the Soviet authorities, their involvement. They promoted invitation of a prominent expert in Buddhist, Malalasikara. He was invited to Moscow, and he became the teacher of the Pali language to the secretary of Yuri Rerich. So these two researchers laid the foundations of the study of Ceylon Buddhism in Soviet Union. These are two prominent explorers. Then they were joined by other big names. They continued the study, but most prominent scholars include Alexander Safronov, and in St. Petersburg there was established an individual separate school of studying Ceylon Buddhism, and they still continue this tradition, studying the Ceylon Buddhism at the modern level, modern times. After these big experts, professional scholars, Krasnodemskaya, Safronov, I cannot see other big names, but many aspects of Ceylon Buddhism, new phenomena in Ceylon Buddhism, are little known to Russian scholars, to Russian people, unfortunately. And since now Russia is turning into a center, uniting of people in research circles, and not only research circles, with Buryatia as the center of this unity, of this interest. I hope it gives hope that studying Southern Buddhism, in particular Ceylon Buddhism, will have a new breath, will be continued. Thank you.
Скажите, немножко не в тему.
One question, maybe not directly connected with your topic, but can we say that Sri Lankan Buddhism now has turned into so-called tourist Buddhism? This is the name I heard. So this is not the teaching of Buddhism per se, but kind of Buddhist tradition, Buddhist attraction for tourists to make money. How valid is this? What do you think? How is the essential development of Buddhism is present? No, I cannot agree with this opinion. This is not a tourist attraction, of course. But yeah, sure, religious tourism, so-called, is one of the sources for the country's income. But still, we can see some here among the guests, Buddhist monks, and also in the Hall 1, who can certify that they still practice these deep ancient Buddhist traditions that have been formed and that were formed back in the 3rd century, and Buddhism is still influencing the authorities, the elections in the country. I would say that in the past, say, 20, 30 years, we have seen people, young people, who have a very deep interest in Buddhist practices. They are deeply involved. Yes, they are a few who devote themselves not to academic study of Buddhism, but to practices. So yeah, thank you so much.
Now, we would like to give the floor to Spaldon Jackman from Ladakh University. Ladakh, who will tell us about Buddhism and in Buryatia and Ladakh.
Good morning to all of you, respected chair and
Доброе утро, уважаемый председатель, все присутствующие. Тема моего доклада – буддизм и модернизация в Бурятии и Ладакхе. Сравнение. Прежде всего, хочу поблагодарить организаторов Международного форума за приглашение. И я хочу рассказать о сравнительном исследовании буддизма в Бурятии и Ладакхе, потому что вижу сходство на разных уровнях. Прежде всего, цель была показать, что люди как в Бурятии, так и в Ладакхе по-прежнему связаны с буддизмом, практикуют буддизм. А во-вторых, я хотела показать, как разные школы буддизма взаимосвязаны в этих двух регионах и по каким параметрам можно сказать, что разные школы буддизма в Бурятии и Ладакхе применяют как разные.
thank you. I will start with the introduction. From the as per the Snail Group, Buddhism has been spread over the Indian subcontinent. Then after 1,000 years, it has established as a main religion throughout Asia. From the 1st century AD, it has spread across Central Asia to China, then in 4th century, moving to Korea, Japan, and was successfully established in the 7th century in Tibet. In ancient India, Buddhism growth was crucial in many kingdoms like Vaishali, Kapilavastu, Kalinga kingdom, and Lavechi kingdom. These kingdoms led Buddhism spread in modern states of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and the South India states of Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. From India, Buddhism traveled to Tibet, to China, to Korea, to Thailand, to Mongolia, and a few republics of Russia. Then we have what defined the modernized Buddhist modernity is will refer to a coined term by Indologist and Buddhologist Hans Bichert, who described that Buddhist modernism is a reinterpretation of Buddhist thought because of the transformation of Buddhism in the South and East Asia. Buddhism advances into the West, where Buddhism defined as a philosophy rather than a religion and a scientific method over a ritual performance. And this was not a first time when we are studying Buddhism in terms of modernization and globalization. We had Buddhism has earlier practiced the globalization when it used to travel across the globe, when especially in the Chandragupta Maurya grandson, King Ashoka period, who used to send missionaries to other nations to spread the Buddhist teachings. So according to Palmer, King Ashoka vision the world is becoming more intertwined. It need to be connected by economics, empires, trade, or languages, where reality and compassion need to work together. Therefore, globalization and modernization was not familiar to Buddhism, is not a new term for Buddhism in today's era. Coming to the first area of studies, we have Buddhism and modernization in Ladakh. Before that, I wanted to make some note on the Buddhism in India, how still the people of India is directly or indirectly following the teaching of Buddha through the values that has been inculcated by the freedom fighter like Mahatma Gandhi and the social reformists like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who have the philosophical base of Buddha's teaching on non-discrimination that are being enshrined in Indian's constitution and preamble. And so far, India has around, in many states like Lahore, Spiti, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Ladakh, West Bengal, and Maharashtra, have the population of Buddhist majority. Coming to the first part of my area of study, that is Buryatia. Buddhism has become significant in Buryatia in around 1712, when around 150 Mongolian and Tibetan monks established themselves into the Khori and the Selingan clans. Then Buddhism was widespread to Buryatia, from India to Tibet to Mongolia, then Buryatia. Firstly, the phase was 13th to 14th century, then the second phase was 16th to 17th century, and the later it was in 17th to 18th century. And it also let many Tibetan head lamas and Tulkus travel to give teachings in Mongolia and Buryatia and Dastan and monastery. And later Buryatia went to Tibet for monastic studies. Even Buryatia, the monks and the laymen both went to Tibet for monastic studies. And by 1846, we have seen there are around 4,509 lamas and 34 monasteries in Buryatia. And His Holiness always stated that the Buddhism that has spread from India to Tibet to Mongolia to Republic of Mauritius and other nations is the Nalanda tradition. And we have seen the two phases of the travel of Buddhism. First is the Tsarist regime, where they have faced the Orthodox Church hostile towards the Buddhism and regarded as a competitor. And Buddhism, mainly because Buddhism attracted non-Buddhist people in their religion. And secondly, we had communism, and at that phase, both Buddhism and communism were growing at an infant stage. And the year 1917 has been proved hard for Buddhism, because by 1920, many new religious policies have emerged to control and regulate religion by the Soviet regime. And therefore, many key figures have came out for the safeguard of Buddhism, like they have said that they showed the world the modern scientific philosophy aspect of Buddhism, and they even go to an extent of saying that Marxism and Buddhism share similar ideology that led to attract many intellectuals from Russia and Europe. So we have many Buddhist scholars who have worked on it, and especially they are Lama Afgan Dorjeev, E.D. Rinchinov, and G. Tibeskov. They started to renew a movement to renew the religion by the Buddhist Sangha, which takes place in India. They aim to connect the science and Buddhism, change the negative images of the Lamanism, and also to cultivate a modern outlook to save Buddhism. After the dissolution of USSR, there were many attempts to make for the revival of Buddhism in Buryatia. The first was made by the Geshe Lama Trinle, who arrived in Russia for teaching. Another is a Yellow Center started. Then also since 1993, on the advice of Dalai Lama, the exchange of the students and the teachers between India and Buryatia has been started in order to gain the spiritual understanding of the Buddha's teaching. Since these steps were being adopted to shift the attention from being only construction of dastan and to develop a more spiritual attainment of the teachings. And similarly, in today's modern Russia, we found many new Buddhist communities coming out that are of Lama Oli Naidel, who identify himself with the Tibetan Karma Kagyu tradition. And we have also the Dzogchen community by Namkhen Nurbu Rinpoche in 1993 that has been started in the St. Petersburg. So there we have seen the changes were taking place because the presence of traditional school of Buddhism were already there, and due to modernization we witnessed the new Buddhist schools organization, meditation center, and to name a few, I have the Medar, the Green Tara, the Rhyme Movement, the Diamond Path Center, and the Kundroling. So presently there are 120 Buddhist community registered in the Russian Federation.
Time. Go to conclusions.
So coming to the first purpose of the study, that how far people have identified themselves as Buddhist in Maurya state, and we can say that in the Buddhist society, very few people of the Buddhist society today feel the need to identify themselves as a Buddhist as necessarily. And the second, the question here been asked that do you agree that there is a struggle to contest the space among different schools? So there is a same proportion of share of percentage that they strongly agree as well as they disagree. And thirdly, the role of Buddhist organization in today's era. In this questionnaire, the maximum respondent agreed that there is an involvement of the different schools of Buddhism to support, maximize their support from their followers. So coming to the portion of Ladakh, we have the Lachen Palgi Nimagun dynasty who have ruled in Ladakh, who have become the main source of to draw Buddhism from Tibet in Ladakh. And then we have the Namgyal dynasty also. And in Ladakh, at presently, there is Geluk school, there is Yellow Drukpa school, there is Drungpa school, there is Nyingmapa, and Theravada school of Buddhism also operating in Ladakh. So coming to the parameters of how you identify as a Buddhist in the context of Ladakh, we have that most of the, around 50% of the respondent has stated that they identify themselves as a Buddhist. And there is also the gaining contestation of space in the globalized Ladakh, and the different schools of Buddhism has been working on it. And there is, lastly, the opinion is that all the significant heads of the Buddhist schools has been engaged in the welfare activities as well as the other community program to engage with the people in this today's modern world. Thank you, sir.
Спасибо большое. Один только маленький вопрос. Вы заявили свой доклад как сравнение. Если это сравнение, if this is a comparison,
Can you briefly explain the main similarities between Buddhism in Ladakh and Buryatia and the main differences? So briefly, similarities, differences.
Similarities we have
what kind of similarities
yes.
do Buddhism in Ladakh and Buryatia have?
Yes. Similarities we have, both the region are following the Mahayana school of Buddhism, firstly. And secondly, the traditional form of Buddhism being the schools of Buddhism present in Buryatia and Ladakh is almost similar. The Gelugpa is also most prominent in both the region. And we have the other sub-schools also, including Sakya and the Drukpa school also, which is also present here. And the differences, I see that the language differences, both, and the another similarities, we have the both belonging to the, both have traces of Mongolian race in both Burят and Ladakh. They have language differences, and they have differences of the sovereignty. The Buddhist schools of in Buryatia, they have now the new assertion among them has came up that to make themselves as a sovereign and independent Russian Buddhist, not dependent on the other foreign Buddhist school. But unlike in Ladakh, they are not, they are not strongly condemning the outside influence into the Ladakh, and they are welcoming the other Buddhist schools or many institutes who are wanted to come and to do their functioning in Ladakh, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Well, thank you very much. So it's so nobody actually says to us to stop. So I have an option. I have a presentation. If you want, I will present it. If you do not want, we can limit to the discussion regarding what we have already heard today, and maybe it will be more interesting. So there are two options. Which one would you prefer? So presentation, okay? Yeah, so you said it. Thank you. Briefly, I would like to tell you about what's going on with Buddhism in the modern Japan. Which school is the most popular in the Japanese Buddhism? First of all, let me provide you with some statistics. 124 million people live in Japan, and there are 180 million of believers. A Japanese person believes in Shintoism and Buddhism at the same time, and it's okay for a person of Japan. So as for the schools, the biggest number of monks and temples, as well as followers, belong to Amidaism school or Buddhism school. So it's very unique because it was formed not in one particular country. Why Buddhism in Japan? The question is. The answer is very simple, because it's very light. It's not complicated. It's not complex. It's very. It has very easy access and availability, and over the first centuries of existing in Japan, Buddhism didn't manage to become popular religion. First of all, the schools of high philosophical development and high school were present there, Mahayana school, Shingon school, which were interesting to aristocracy. But then soon ecological and social challenges occurred in Japan, civil wars, epidemics, let me say sufferings, and these iron line, the epoch of the law, which started from 1052, the year 1052, made people suffer and desperate, where people of Japan could see murders, dead bodies around them, and those social disasters, social disorders, provoke this sense of the end of the world. And on the other hand, people wanted to conquer it, to fight it, and to counter it. Well known to you, or I would say well known 48th rule of Bodhisattva, who later became Buddha, who said that anyone who would pronounce my name would turn to have it clear land, pure land. So to say, it was the catalysis of that made, or the trigger that made Japanese to to turn to Buddhism. At first, there were just individuals, several individuals, as volunteers, as modern volunteers. They collected dead bodies across the countries. They tried to alleviate sufferings of people, and some saints, they were descendants from the emperor's families who couldn't tolerate what was going on, and he himself walked across Japan with his friend Deer. They walked across cities. He was singing songs, of course, with Buddhist motives, with the idea that it was very easy. You just need to say, so, Buddha Amida, you need just to call Buddha to help you. And this simplicity, this easy access and availability of Buddhism for people, it was so clear to people, and people liked it. And sometimes, after severe fights on the battlefield, where dying warriors suffered from wounds, new Amidaists were walking across those fields, and they set up little Buddhas Amitabha with these scarlet threads, and they pull these threads to the fingers of dying warriors to stimulate, to motivate them to pronounce this formula. So after death, they could be born again on a pure land. Yes, it was like that. And of course, many questions appeared in these sutras that was existing in 6 translations, and each translation was different, honestly speaking. So one translation said it was enough to say my name and then you will rebirth on a pure land. Then another translation says that you need to repeat 6 times my name, yeah, and we say okay, 1, 2, 3 times or whatever, every time, seen at a time, or every day, or how many times, what is the period, what is the frequency of saying this, yeah. So, and because of these, several directions appeared, and about which modern researchers say it's a monotheistic tradition appeared, when something similar to, so to say, the image of God appeared, of some creature or deity that can help with, and with its power would be able to help this land. Yeah, of course, there were different opinions on it. Some of them said that only belief can save a human being, nothing else. There are no efforts that could help a human being. Others said that, no, what are you talking about? A human being is very weak. Yeah, through a belief or through our own forces, we cannot do anything. We can only depend on the help of Bodhisattva Karmaka or future Buddha Amida, who can actually help you. And the third group said, no, we need to get out of the samsara. Let's gather together and sing songs. Let's dance together. And so let's use this mixture of everything. Let's dance in a circle, and which reminded actually Russian religious dances of devoted to the birth of Christ. Yeah, so there was a diversity, but it wasn't easy. And Amidaists were the first who were open to transform Buddhist concept. They openly started to get married. Actually, Singram was married twice. He had 7 children, and still Amidaists in Japan, they can get married. They can have families, and they do have families. Yeah, and it's very good because the wives of these Amidaists monks and priests. They play a key role in the contact with the followers, with devotees who come to the temples. They are easy to contact, for example, to compare with men, with people who come to temples. So actually, wives of these monks and practitioners play a crucial role. So even Amidists who are considered to be in the majority in Japan cannot change the situation because interest in Buddhism in many countries, similar to many countries of the world, decreases, and sometimes not very popular attempts to promote the Buddhist teachings occur. I told this story when in Nara temple they had can performance. They brought girls bands who were dancing can just below Buddha's statue. Of course, it attracted attention, but very specific attention, I would say. Yeah, but you see, but it became very popular, and actually, Amidaist bars are and pubs are popular in Japan. You know, at 11 p.m. all bars are closed, but for Amidaists, legal entities, these bars can be open. They serve different cocktails with different names, you know, pure land, so three treasures, so four truths, etc. With very, very philosophical names, these cocktails are sold, you know, and it explains that people sometimes are very lonely in the evening, and they can come to a bar, they can see a monk dressed in a monk's robe, yeah, and maybe this monk can explain something about Buddhism or Amidaism, yeah. Is it good or not? I don't know, but at least it's a kind of an attempt to bring something new, to to bring some new spirit in the Buddhist teaching. And generally speaking, the Buddhist faces a huge alternative to rebirth into a tradition, which I wanted to ask in my question regarding tourism Buddhism. I just told you about the bars which promote this alcoholic Buddhism. Yeah, so just at least some attempts to support Buddhist traditions. Yes, we know the reason why we need to find the solutions, or we have to wait until this period ends, and then everything will be burned by the flame. Can you maybe like that? Thank you for your attention. Right. I would ask you. Maybe you have. Maybe you have questions, or you want to express your ideas regarding Buddhism in the modern world. Yeah, you are welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, dear monks, ladies and gentlemen. I'm from Nepal delegation, and I'm pleased to be here with you. I would like to add something that Mr. Antuna said about Ivan Minaev, the researcher, distinguished researcher, and I would like to give you some details about it. He is a great researcher, professor, and Buddhist research practitioner, and he was in Sri Lanka, in India, and it was in 1870s, and he also visited Nepal and Tibet. In Nepal, he knew Nepal. He was fluent in Nepal, and he even knew the vocabulary, and he comprised a dictionary. You know, it's very interesting. A Russian researcher, and he wrote a lot in different languages. There are few researchers like that who did a lot for Buddhism. And he is a professor of St. Petersburg University. He was a professor of St. Petersburg University. He lived at the same time with Tolstoy. I read in a book that when he returned from India, he met Lev Tolstoy and asked him where did you go? What did you bring? And Tolstoy was also interested in Buddhism, and then Ivan Milayev took out of his pocket mantra, and he was reading this mantra to Tolstoy as in Sri Lanka, the same way. And the same way he worked in Sri Lanka, he knew a lot in different fields. For Nepal, Nepal used to be a closed country, and so 150 years ago, we didn't see any tourists there. And thanks to Ivan Minaev, tourists started to go to Nepal. Yeah. So he was the pioneer to Nepal tourism, and we are very grateful for this. I'm the vice president of the Russian Nepal cooperation and friendship, this community. And our community set up a bust in Nepal 3 years ago. If you go to Nepal, you will see this bust. Thank you very much. Anybody else to add anything? You're welcome. Who wants to add something?
The questions. If some of our speakers are still here, I listened to all the speakers. I think that here we are talking about the traditional Buddhism and modern challenges. I'm struggling with myself. What kind of, where that Buddhism can stand at the moment in terms of economic crisis, political crisis, climate change. And sometimes, when something happening and the human being deeply suffering from all this kind of injustice and violence, but the Buddhist communities keep very silent on that. Sometimes we even don't do anything, but even though we condemn ourselves, we did not do it. I find it's very difficult to see all this kind of happening from the Buddhist community. Is there any kind of ideas or suggestion that we, the Buddhists, can stand to see all these kind of challenges which is happening in the world? If someone could answer this question, would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Before answering this kind of questions, we should consider whether Buddhism is the teaching that is aimed at improving the society or on improving yourself. If you are trying to improve yourself, that's one question. If you are speaking about calamities in the world, economic crisis and so on, well, Buddhism is not an official organization to World Bank, for example, or economic society or whatever. So we're speaking about improving ourselves, not about improving the society. Or you want to improve the world as a Buddhist, no?
I don't say how to improve the world or what, but Buddhism is very, very private in terms of improving our personal practice. But we are part of the society, and we have like millions of Buddhists and a lot of Buddhist community. At least as a Buddhist, can we say something to which what is happening? Because everything is interconnected. What is happening here is also affected in the other parts of the world, or what is happening in other part of the world is also affected here. It means that the whole society is interconnected. We are part of the society. So as a Buddhist, what kind of where we can stand to where we can stand, what kind of contribution that we can help the world to improve something. Not the whole world, but at least any small part of contribution can be done from the Buddhist community.
Why don't you remember Buddha? He was just trying to quit the society. He went to the forests, well, for ascetic practices and so on, and then he didn't return to the society. He returned to those people who were ready to listen to him. Well, he was preaching. Well, go ahead and preach. Go ahead and preach as a Buddhist. As a Buddhist, you have the audience that is listening for you. That's your role in the society.
No, the Buddha did come back and sacrifice his 45 years in the society. He doesn't got the enlightenment.
You call it
and stay
sacrifice?
silent.
You call it sacrifice?
Kind of commitment. Maybe I am wrong in English, but this is what we have said in the scriptures. The Buddha spent like 45 years to work day and night.
Yes, well, he was preaching to those who were ready to listen to him. Go ahead. Find somebody who is ready to listen to you and preach to him.
Okay, I just give you one example. When there was a war between the two kingdoms, and then the Buddha went to the battlefield to intervene, to say something that war is not good. With the word that he said, because the war at that time was about to wake, two kingdoms were about to fight for the water, and then he went to the battlefield and he asked a question, whether the water and the blood, which one is more worth. This is kind of intervention that the Buddha tried to help the society. This is what we learn.
That's a good story, but just try to imagine how you go to the battlefield where people are fighting and try to preach something to them. I'm afraid it's impossible nowadays.
That's why I'm...
Oh, go ahead. You're Buddhist, aren't you? You're the Buddhist. I am a
why-
Buddhologist. You're the Buddhist, yes? That's the difference.
Yes, but
Yes, I am not going to preach to anybody about anything at all. But that's your duty, I think so.
no,
No?
no, sir. The thing is, I'm here to seek any suggestion or idea from our previous speaker could share as a Buddhist. Yeah, say some or any idea that we can help the world.
Yes, that's your duty, just to try to, because you have the karuna, you have the pity for everybody.
Yes, that is my question. If anyone can share, or if not, it's okay.
Well, let us ask the distinguished people.
In my perception, the Venerable's question is very important. Nowadays, this world is facing different types of problems. In my perceptions, what should be done in that circumstance? The Buddha's teachings are not only related to the suffering. His teachings are related to the different aspect. He had given various types of teachings in the different period in his life. His teachings are associated with the conflict. His teachings are associated with the management, environment, and conflict, and health and hygiene in different aspects. So nowadays, we should disseminate those types of teachings which are associated with the different aspect. If we can do that, maybe we will get some solutions. This is my just opinion.
Yes, I understand. Well, actually, whatever we say, this is our interpretation of Buddha's words and the words of his associates and so on. I am afraid we are very, very late, and you will have nothing to eat and to drink. So let us finish this kind of our panel. I thank you all for your patience, for your assistance. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, collective photo, please.